Legend says your fate and mine were quietly decided long after Pangu split heaven from earth by a single act of laziness from one goddess. That year, the world had just cracked open from chaos, mountains and rivers barely opening their eyes for the first time. A goddess with a human face and a serpent's body walked alone across this empty land. Her name was Nuwa. She looked up at the clouds, down at the water, and felt, deep in her chest, that this vast world was missing something. Missing it in a way that made her uneasy. You've probably heard the official summary of this story. Nuwa molded humans from clay, the benevolent mother of all mankind, dignified as a statue enshrined in a temple. But what I'm about to tell you is the version the official records are too embarrassed to spell out. A goddess who also got tired, also got frustrated, and yes, also got lazy. You heard that right. Creating the human race came with its own real-life episode of a deity working overtime until she nearly broke down. Here's your spoiler. Some of your ancestors were shaped one by Nuwa's own hands. Others' ancestors were just a few splatters of mud she flung off in a hurry. That's right, the earliest divide between noble and common blood was never fate. It was Nuwa's emergency fix for her own aching wrists. For thousands of years, people believed being born into wealth meant your ancestors had earned divine favor, that you were chosen. Being born poor meant it was simply your fate. Accept it and move on. But what if I told you that this whole idea of nobility and poverty are destined traces back to nothing more than one exhausted goddess taking a shortcut? Would you still comfortably believe in the word fate?
Today, I don't want to gloss over Nuwa's story with the four hollow words, the Great Mother Goddess. I want to take a different angle, starting from her hands, caked in yellow mud, aching more with every figure she shaped, to tell you how a creator goddess invented humanity out of her own loneliness and exhaustion, and quietly invented the first crack running through human society. When heaven and earth had just separated, at the foot of Mount Kunlun, there was only Nuwa. Coiled on the riverbank in her serpent form, she stared at her own reflection in the clear water and felt, for the first time, an overwhelming loneliness. The world was vast and beautiful, clouds drifting, grass and trees flourishing, yet there was no voice to answer her, no eyes to meet hers, not even an echo to keep her company. She tried shouting at the mountains. They only threw back a hollow echo. She tried speaking to the wind. It just rushed past, tugging at her sleeves before vanishing. Day after day, this loneliness wound around her like creeping vines, tightening with each passing hour. She genuinely tried other methods first, rolling broad leaves into human shapes, only to have them collapse in the wind, stacking stones into human forms, only to have rain topple them. She even reached into her own reflection in the water, trying to scoop it out. But her hands came up holding nothing but cool river water. After who knows how many days and nights of failed attempts, she nearly concluded that there was simply no way to keep companionship by her side. Then, one day, she bent down and gathered the finest yellow clay from the banks of the Yellow River, mixed it with clear water, and kneaded it again and again. Following her own reflection in the water, she slowly shaped the very first clay figure. 2 hands, 2 legs, a smiling face, curved brows, fine straight nose. She leaned in gently and blew a breath into it. The clay figure gasped, "Ah!" opened its eyes, and came alive, bouncing and laughing at her feet. Nuwa froze completely. Life could truly be given by her own 2 hands. Overjoyed, she shaped one figure after another, men, women, the elderly, children, until the riverbank was crowded with laughter and chatter, the sound carrying far down the water. In that moment, this land that had known nothing but loneliness for who knows how long finally took on the shape of human civilization. Honestly, watching this scene, I have to ask, was Nuwa's expression back then anything like pulling a rare hidden character from a late-night blind box? Except her blind box opened up into a living, breathing person who could laugh, cry, and call her mother. But the problem came quickly. The land was too vast, and Nuwa only had 2 hands. She shaped one, smiled, shaped another, and her wrist ached a little more. Day after day, her fingertips grew thick with calluses, mud soaking into her hands over and over. Even her serpent tail caked with dried, cracked, whitened clay wedged between the scales. She wanted the whole earth filled with laughter and hearth smoke, but her hands simply couldn't keep up with her burning wish. She began molding clay figures through entire nights, working from sunset to sunrise, her arms too sore to lift, her eyelids too heavy to stay open. Yet she didn't dare stop, afraid that the moment she paused, this land that had only just come alive would sink back into dead silence. Even so, the land remained achingly empty, nowhere near full enough to hold the vast mountains and rivers. Sometimes, halfway through shaping a figure, she'd fall asleep leaning against a riverside rock, still cradling an unfinished, half-formed clay figure, only to wake with the sun already high, rubbing her eyes and hurrying back to work. Finally, one day, utterly exhausted, Nuwa made a decision that later generations would argue over for thousands of years. She found a hanging vine by the river, dipped it deep into the mud until it was thick with clay, and then swung it hard across the land. Mud droplets scattered in every direction, and wherever they landed, they too transformed into living, breathing people. It turned out creating life didn't require careful, stroke-by-stroke craftsmanship. The flung droplets of mud could stand, laugh, cry, and run in the sunlight just the same. Except the people shaped by hand turned out fine-featured, well-proportioned, carrying an innate air of grace, while those flung from the vine came out rougher, destined for harder, more turbulent lives. In later legends, those born wealthy and gifted were said to be Nuwa's handcrafted work, while the multitudes who toiled and struggled through life were said to be the mud droplets flung from that vine. And so, the exhaustion and expedience of a single vine quietly became, generation after generation, the story of nobility and poverty being destined by heaven.
Have you noticed how this detail has been quietly played down, even forgotten over the centuries? No one wants to tell you that so-called origin ultimately comes down to one goddess, utterly worn out, making a split-second choice. But even after shaping and flinging again, Nuwa soon realized the human population still wasn't enough, because clay figures had a lifespan, but no descendants. Only then did she truly understand that she alone could never sustain a future for this entire, endlessly living land. So she did something even smarter. She paired men and women together and established the rite of marriage, teaching humanity to reproduce on its own, no longer dependent on her 2 aching hands. From that day on, Nuwa wasn't just a creator. She quietly became humanity's very first matchmaker, stepping back to watch the world she had lit with her own hands grow and continue on its own. But you and I, today, should really see through this layer, whether shaped by Nuwa's own hands or flung from that vine. What flows through us is the very same handful of yellow clay from the banks of the Yellow River, the very same lonely, burning devotion of one goddess, and not a single drop of it was ever wasted. So-called nobility and poverty were never heaven's verdict. They were the reluctant, tender choice of an exhausted creator, caught between boundless love and the limits of her own strength. So, next time someone tells you it's just your fate,
you can smile and answer. My ancestor might have only been a droplet of mud Nuwa flung off in exhaustion, but that droplet still carried all of her tenderness, all of her loneliness, and the heartbeat of an entire era. But once Nuwa finished creating humankind, the story was far from over. Soon, she would face the very first catastrophe that nearly wiped out all of humanity. The sky collapsing, the earth splitting open, floods swallowing the world, the four pillars of heaven crumbling. And this time, the price she would pay would be 1,000 times harder than molding clay into life. Next episode, we uncover the truth behind Nuwa mends the sky, a truth even the myth itself dares not fully tell.